and welcome mindsetters to this session of grade 12 Learn Extra. Hope you guys got your pens and pads out and you're ready to make notes. I'm Ty and I'm here with Aslam. Aslam, tell us what's happening today.
Today we're looking at life processes, Ty, and we're starting with section A in that part. I've broken it up into two parts. It's way too long to do in 1 hour.
Okay, all right, so it's going to be jam-packed today.
Jam-packed,
right, so while Aslam makes his way across to the board, mindsetters, make sure you get on the page. You know the link, www.facebook.com/learn extra. Let me know what you guys are thinking. If you're lost in here, if you need help, if you're foggy in a couple of areas, make sure you get on the page and let me know. But on that note, I also want to say, make sure you tell a friend, tell a friend, to tell another friend to get your friends on the page. We're trying to get to 20,000. So come on, we can't do it without your help. But on that note, this is when I hand off to Aslam. Aslam, take it away.
Thank you, Ty. Guys, as we're saying on the board there, revision. You're already busy with your trial exams, so obviously you are studying all your subjects, and in that time, don't study for one subject only at a time. Spread your timetable out so that you have enough time for each of the papers that you write. We're looking at life processes, and as usual, we have a little flow diagram to tell us what we need to know. And as I've called this one here, life processes part 1. What do we need to know there? First of all, we look at plant hormones, the defense mechanisms of plants as well. From there, what are we looking at? We're looking at the functions of oxygen, gibberellin, abscisic acid. We're looking at these two important processes, phototropism and geotropism. We also want to look at how we use these hormones, these oxygens, gibberellins, and abscisic acid in agriculture. How do these chemicals help us in this agricultural industry? We also want to know how plants use chemicals and thorns to protect themselves. Then we move on to the animals. Animals also respond to the environment. And we use two systems. We're looking at one at the moment, and that is the nervous system. The nervous system is made up of the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system. By now, you should know those terminologies, and the questions will bring some of them out. We also want to know the disorders of the nervous system and how drugs affects the nervous system. What does the drug that you use or abuse, what does it do to your nervous system? How does it affect you? We also want to know the structures and functions of the neurons, that's in the peripheral nervous system. We want to know about the spinal cord and the reflex arc especially. And then we move on, guys, to the receptors, or we can say the sense organs. And they are the eye and the ear. Those are the two that you learn in grade 12. Obviously, by now you should know that the skin plays a role in sense organs as well, and so too does the tongue, and so too does the nose. But we are focusing on the eye and the ear for grade 12, so that's all you need to know. What do we need to know in the eye? We need to know the structure and the functions of the eye. It's a simple diagram, label the diagram. Next to it, say what each part is going to do the work. And important here are the processes of accommodation and pupillary mechanisms. And this is where most learners lose marks. Knowing the diagram, labeling the diagram, giving the labels, giving the functions, it's okay. But once we come to these processes, and if they are slightly differently, we have problems. We also want to know what disorders there are in the eye and how we can correct them. In the ear, we're looking again at structure and functions, the same as we did in the eye. We want to know the two most important functions in the ear are hearing and balance. We also want to know how this hearing can be defect. In other words, what problems one can have with hearing. And we want to know the link between hearing defects and speech defects. How does hearing defect affect the way we speak? We're going to look at that as well. You have to look at that. We will look at the questions. And lastly, something that you should have done anyway in this country, you should not be able to ignore something like this, and that is the rights of deaf and blind people. In this country, we are concerned with the rights of every single citizen in the country. So the deaf and the blind people are also citizens of the country, and what are their rights, and what should we be doing for them, and how should we be treating them. So those are, in a nutshell, part one. Remember, this is just one part of life processes. When we do the second part, we will then unfold the next part. We go straight into questions, guys. And the first question, and we're moving in the order as we unfolded them. So the first question is dealing with the plant hormones. The graph below shows the growth response of roots and shoots to auxins applied at different concentrations. So in other words, we have taken some plants and we have exposed them to auxins at different concentrations. And the investigator then recorded his data and presented it in a form of a graph. And remember, as always, a graph must have a heading. The y-axis must have a heading. The x-axis must have a heading. Your intervals must be even, and the both sides must be labeled as such. Also, the units are given here. Notice this one is a little different. There's a bit of inhibition here, and there's stimulation above the line. So anything below this line is inhibition. Anything above the line is stimulation. Again, guys, how important is it not to go through this thing to understand what is being said here? If you do not look at this point here and that point there and that line in between, you've already messed up the question, because you would not be able to understand what is happening. So first and foremost, you need to absorb what this thing is telling you. You must negotiate this graph. The first question there, at what concentration of auxins do shoots show the most growth? Now, guys, did you have to study life science or mathematics or anything to answer this particular question? No, you did not. You needed to know how to read from a graph. And like riding a bicycle, Ty, once you learn to ride it,
You can always ride a bicycle.
and would you have to ride the same bicycle all the time?
No, you can ride different bicycles. It's like driving.
That's right. It's the same with driving. I don't have to learn on a Mercedes to drive a Mercedes. Yes, when I get into a fancy Mercedes, I may get confused because the way the keys work in these cars may confuse me, but the way you drive will still be the same. So if you learn the skill of reading a graph, drawing a graph, it doesn't make a difference which graph you get, you should be able to read. They want to know where's the most growth. And obviously, guys, what do you have to look at? Where's the shoots? Where's the highest? There's the point there. You would take your ruler, you're going to go down, and you would see that you'll come around to that particular reading there, and that would be 10 to the minus 1, or we can say 0,1. That would be our answer. But how many marks are given there? 2 marks are given there. So you're getting 1 mark for that, and yes, you're getting the other mark for the unit, parts per million. Parts per million. And where did we get this from? Here in the graph. There's the unit given in the graph. You're taking that unit and you're adding it there. So notice how the mark is given. 1 for that and 1 for this. Guys, remember, whether the mark is given for the unit or not, put the unit there. Because if the mark is given for the unit, and if you, by mistake, put the wrong number down, at least you're getting 1 out of 2, which is 50%. Better than nothing. Still with the same graph. 1.2, at what concentration of auxins does growth begin to be inhibited in roots? Now that is where I told you got to look at that line. And there's the line there. Where does it start dropping? At this particular point, where the graph meets the line there. And that would come down there, and your answer would be 10 to the minus 3. 10 minus 3. That is 0,003. 001, sorry. Okay, and again, we're getting a mark for that, and again, parts per million. Units are important. That's the second mark. Very simple so far, guys. We're not even touching on the theory yet. Now we go to theory. They say, name 2 places in plants where auxins are produced. Where are auxins produced? And those are at the growing tips. Where do we get the growing tips? The growing tips of the root and the growing tip of the shoot or the stem. Straightforward, level 1 recall question. Now they want to know, explain the role of auxins in apical dominance. There's two parts here. One is auxins, and the second one is apical dominance. We must understand firstly what apical dominance is. Apical dominance means to dominate. Apical at the growing point. That means at the tip of the stem. That is where growth is dominant. That is where the plant will grow most. Apical dominance means that as long as the growing tip is in place, it will inhibit side branches from growing. This is what apical dominance means. So they want to know, how does auxin make this happen? Very simple. Auxin from the tip moves downwards to the lateral branches. And as you have learnt in geotropism, in phototropism, that in different parts of the plant, auxin works differently. For example, in the growing tip, a high concentration of auxin stimulates growth. In the root, a high concentration of auxin inhibits growth. And also in the lateral branches, high concentration inhibits growth. So this part will grow slower, and the tip will grow faster. And this apical dominance. The growing tip will keep going up. I'm hoping we're on the same page here. By the way, in this same question, they could still ask you about phototropism and geotropism. Just to quickly recap. Phototropism, tropism, movement, behavior of plants. Photo in response to light. And we replace that with geo, that is in response to gravity. And we could replace that with hydro, that would be in response to water. We could replace it with thigmo, and that would be in response to touch. We are interested mainly in these two, and we need to know what that means, hydrotropism. So phototropism is bending movements of plants towards the light, or away from the light. And geotropism is towards or away from gravity. If a particular part is moving towards the light, we say it is positively phototropic. If it moves away, then it is negatively. The same with gravity. If it moves towards gravity, positively geotropic. If it's moving away, it is negatively. The roots are obviously positively geotrophic, and the stems are negatively. Stems grow upwards, they're not growing down. At the same time, stem grows towards the light, so it is positively phototropic. You need to be able to explain how auxin brings about these movements. So make sure that you learn that as well. The last question says, explain how plants use thorns and chemicals to protect themselves. Simple story here. 3 words again. Thorns, chemicals, protection. They want to know, how does a plant use these things? The first one is obvious, guys. If the thorn is on a plant, and if an animal eats the thorn, the animal will get hurt. So the animal, by learning this experience, will not eat that plant again. So it's a protective function. At the same time, the thorns are sort of reduced sized leaves, and with the thorns you'll see are found mainly in xerophytic plants, and this is also a protection against water loss. So in 2 ways. One is from being eaten by herbivores, and 2 is by being reducing the amount of water the plant will lose. The second one is chemicals. Again, Plants secrete certain chemicals. These chemicals can either be poisonous or they can be unpleasant in the taste, maybe bitter or whatever. So when that happens, obviously, when the animal is going to eat this, the animal is going to have a hard time in that the plant it's going to be devastating in the fact that it's poisonous, or if it's unpleasant, it's bitter, it's not going to eat it again. Also, some plants, like the acacia plants, when they are eaten by giraffes, for example, when the leaves are being eaten by giraffes, the acacia plant secretes a chemical which causes other chemicals to rise in other plants further away. So it's a protective communication via chemicals in plants. In this way, the plants protect themselves from being eaten by herbivores. In other words, they're protecting themselves. Okay? The next question deals with the brain. The first question says label parts 1, 2, 3, and 5. Part 1, very easy, cerebrum. I'm going to change part 2's label line slightly. I'm going to put it there, which is more applicable for your work. So part 2 is this little structure here, which we call the pituitary gland, also known as the hypophysis. Not hypothesis, hypophysis. And number 3 there would be the swelling. Notice low swelling. Just below the hypophysis, the big swelling is the pons. And thereafter, the other little swelling, smaller swelling, is the medulla oblongata. They did not ask for that label. I'm putting it in there. They asked for this one here at the back here. This is the cerebellum. And with that, give it to Ty.
All right, thank you. So on that note, mindsetters, make sure you don't disappear. Make sure you stick around and don't go too far away from your TV, because we're going to see you after this break. Cheers. And welcome back, mindsetters. Hope you had a nice little break there. You went to do whatever you had to do. You're speaking to mom. Now you're done with mom. You had to cut onions. Now you're done with cutting onions. But anyway, now you need to be focused and paying attention with your pens and pads out and ready to make notes. So before we actually continue, I actually have a question here from Pindulo, who's on the page. And I just want to say thank you for posting. Pindulo wanted to find out, are we supposed to know the brain? I'm a bit confused.
Definitely, boy, you need to know the brain. You need to know the brain because it is part of animal responses and it is part of the central nervous system. So you need to know the brain. You need to know the spinal cord. You need to know the functions of the 4 important parts, the cerebrum, the medulla oblongata, the cerebellum, and the pons varolii. You need to know the functions of those as well. So you need to know those functions. Make sure that you learn the diagram of the brain, but don't learn the entire diagram because you do not need to know the other parts. Learn only the parts that you need to know. Please make sure each one of you out there, mindsetters, you get hold of what they call an exam guideline. You should be able to get that from school. That should be your checklist. As you're going along with your work, that exam guideline tells you exactly what you need to know and how far you need to know in each section. Remember, textbooks will have much more than what is required. You need to know what you need to know for the exam. So learn that first. There's no problem in learning more. But first learn what you have to learn. After that, then you add on to your knowledge base. So the brain is definitely in, and it can be tested. Okay, we started with these labels here, and we've given the main labels that we have spoken about. Let's move to the next question. And the next question says, state two functions of parts 1, 4, and 5. One is the cerebrum. We've labeled that already. We know that the cerebrum is the seat of all voluntary actions. It controls all voluntary actions. The fact that I can talk, I am choosing to talk, or I can choose to keep quiet, or I can start again. Voluntary. I can move my hand, or I can stop moving my hand. These are voluntary actions. That means I am conscious about what I want to do, and I am in control of it. So voluntary actions are controlled by the cerebrum. Sensations are also perceived here. We're not talking about just any sensations, we're talking of the senses, the 5 senses. That means the seeing, the touching, the smelling, the tasting, etc., hearing, those senses. They are all perceived in this area. They're interpreted in that area of the cerebrum. Also, memory, to remember the work to remember these 3 functions, I am using my cerebrum. Intelligence is also part of the cerebrum. And one more there would be judgment. To judge whether something is right or wrong, etc., the morals all come from the cerebrum. The next one was number 4. Now 4 is the medulla oblongata. This one here controls involuntary actions. Those actions that are not controlled by the will, that you are not in control of. For example, when you swallow your food, the esophagus and the rest of the digestive canal starts making what we call peristaltic movement to move the food. You cannot put a whole bread loaf down your throat and say, hold on there, bread, I got a lot of food in the stomach. When the other food goes down, then you can start moving the stick. It doesn't work that way. The minute you swallow, peristalsis sets in, not with your thinking, not in your controls, and involuntary movement. So that's one example of an involuntary movement. Also, it controls the heart beat rate. Not the fact that the heart can beat, but the rate at which the heart beats. And it also controls the breathing rate. So there's 3 functions there. We wanted 2, we've given you 3 there. Cerebellum, this one here on the other side. This one coordinates voluntary action. Now you may wonder, we spoke about voluntary action there, we're talking about it here. Here we said it controls, it makes it possible. The fact that I can move my hand, cerebrum is making it possible. Cerebrum is controlling that. But the fact that I can throw this pen and catch it, coordinates voluntary action. The fact that I am walking in a coherent way, coordination is involved. I'm not falling all over the show. When I'm talking coherently. I'm not slurring. I'm not losing my words in between. Coordinating voluntary action. And also controls balance and equilibrium. The fact that we can stand without falling, balance. We can even lift our one leg and still stand, there's balance. So coming from the cerebellum. So those are the functions of those parts. You need to know the labels and you need to know the functions of those parts. So please make sure you learn them. We move on from the brain now to the spinal cord. And the spinal cord generally is tested with the reflex arc. In this case, they're talking about the knee-jerk reflex in humans. When you sit on a stool high up and a doctor knocks your knee and your leg automatically kicks up, we talk of the knee-jerk reflex. There are other reflexes in the body. For example, coughing is a reflex to get rid of any dust particle or whatever else is irritating the throat. Sneezing is a reflex. Blinking the eye when something is coming into the eye is a reflex. And are you ready for this one? Reading type is also a reflex.
Yes.
And we thought we were very clever when we read. There's no thinking involved in reading unless you come across a new word. When you come across a new word, you first have to think about that word and how you learnt your language, how to develop a word, and you pull that word into your vocabulary. But once you've taken it in, the next time you see it, reflex comes out. So reading too, guys, is a reflex action. So those are some of the reflex actions that are in our body. Just to highlight that a reflex action is a quick, automatic response to a stimulus. So in other words, quick, fast, obviously, that's easy. Automatic, without thinking about it, happens instinctively. A response, you're going to do something. Why? Because something else happened. A stimulus was received, and you reacted or responded to the stimulus. So this is what a reflex arc or reflex action is. A reflex arc, on the other hand, is the pathway. It's just a difference between a noun and a verb. Reflex action is the verb. It's a quick automatic response to a stimulus. A reflex arc is the pathway, I'm going to add this on the top, pathway that an impulse follows to bring about a quick automatic response to a stimulus. So you see in these two definitions, this last part is in both definitions. But reflex action only has that part. And the reflex arc has a little bit of an explanation before that. It's like saying, this is the pathway. Like we name, for example, Malibongwe Drive. We want to go somewhere, you tell somebody, go this way. That's the route that you're going to take. M1 north, M1 south. Reflex arc is the pathway, is the route that this impulse is going to take to bring about this action. Now let's get into the question. Identify parts 1 to 4. They'll always be asking you labeling, so you need to know your diagrams. This is the spinal cord, so we need to go there. 1 is this one here. This is the outside. This butterfly or H shape on the inside in the spinal cord represents the gray matter. The white matter is on the outside. So number 1 would be the white matter. And they ask 1, 2, 4. Also something to worry about or to think about. 1, 2, 4 means 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sometimes they say 1 and 4. That one is not so serious. If you write 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll still get all your marks. But if they say 1, 2, 4, and you only put 1 and 4, you're losing 2 marks. Remember that. So let's go back. 2 is the gray matter. If you want to be more specific, this is the top part, so that's dorsal. Dorsal. And this is the bottom part, that will be ventral. So this is the ventral horn of gray matter. That is the dorsal horn. These are the 2 dorsal horns of the gray matter, and these are the 2 ventral horns of the gray matter. It's important to know which is dorsal and which is ventral, because when they're asking you another question later, I will explain that then. Let's leave it for that. There we go. Identify neuron numbered B, or labeled B. Now, here's this neuron here. There's 2 neurons, and you can't really see difference in the structure. They are line diagrams. So therefore, you need to know which is the ventral and which is the dorsal, because the sensory neuron enters from the dorsal horn, and the motor neuron leaves from the ventral horn. So if you follow B, there's B going up, 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 up there, and coming in there. So it's coming in from the dorsal, so B is the sensory neuron. And by the way, a sensory neuron is a neuron that transmits impulses from the receptor to the nervous system, or the central nervous system. Can you see? It's picking it up here from the receptor in this area, and it's taking it to the spinal cord, which is part of the central nervous system. Okay? So sensory neuron there. This one here says, a calculation, assuming an impulse travels at 100 meters per second. How long would it take for an impulse to travel 500 meters? 100 meters per second. How long would it take to get to 500 meters? Simple multiplication. It was 100, we want to know 500. So it's 5 times more. So therefore, if it is 1 second, it's going to take for 100 meters. 500 meters would be 1 times 5, and that is equals to 5 seconds. What they're trying to highlight here, guys, is that the speed of the impulse in your body is extremely fast. And you know this, because if you get burnt, your hand moves away immediately. There's no time to think about it, because if you do think about it, you're going to burn badly. You'll damage your hand further. Here, you're just going to feel a sensation of burning, and you may even not get any scarring. But if you leave it there and you're still thinking about, I think I'm burning, what shall I do? Maybe I should put up my hands. You know what's going to happen in that case. So there we go. That one is easy. Would a person be able to react to a stimulus if part numbered X was severed? Severed means broken, cut, damaged. The actual word is severed. Severed. Right? Explain your answer. There's 3 marks to it. Now let's go back to the diagram. Where's X? X is referring to this area here. It should have been extended to this motor neuron there. The question is, would a person be able to react? Now, what's the purpose of a motor neuron? The motor neuron brings about a response to the stimulus. In other words, it takes a message from the central nervous system, there, to an effector. An effector is a muscle or a gland which brings about a response. For example, you get into the house, you smell good food, and immediately your mouth waters, as we call it. What has happened? The smell has triggered off certain responses, and the motor neuron came to the gland, the salivary glands in this case, and instructed the salivary glands to secrete saliva, a response. So that's what's happening now. If we damage the motor neuron, if we cut it, there, then the impulse is not going to flow to the muscle, and therefore, no. So the answer first, would a person be able to react? No. Why? Because the motor neuron, the impulse rather, would not reach the effector, because the effector is the part that's going to bring about the response. A receptor picks up a stimulus. An effector brings about a response. The neuron's job is to communicate between these two things. I'm hoping we were there on that. Explain your answer. I've given you the explanation already. Because the impulse would not reach the effector. That brings us to sense organs, and we are with the eye. We're going to just go down with the labeling first. Write down the letter of part AG, at which the clearest image is formed. So here they're not asking you to give a label. They're telling you what this thing is doing. They're asking you which one does that. What is the purpose of it? It's still testing the functions. It's still testing the functions. Where's the clearest image formed? And that is in this area here, the yellow spot. Because it has the most rods and cones. So your answer here would be G. Next one says, that is responsible for maintaining the shape of the eyeball. That would be the vitreous humor, F. The next one says that is responsible for nourishing the eye or for the nutrition of the eye. That would be part B, the choroid. By the way, another function of the choroid is it is darkly colored, so it prevents reflection of the light. So when the light comes, it's absorbed. It doesn't scatter all over, because if it does scatter, you wouldn't be able to see the objects. State the function of part D. There's part D there, and that is the cornea. First and foremost, the cornea allows light to pass through. That's the first function. Allows light to pass through. And notice that the cornea is curved. And anything that is curved is going to refract the light. In other words, it's going to bend the light rays. Would that Tutai?
All right. So mindset is, hope the TV doesn't bend the light rays in your eyes too much. But anyway, make sure that you guys get back on the page and chat to me as soon as we come back from this break. But see you soon. Cheers. And welcome back, Mindsetters. Hope you had a nice little break. You went to do whatever you had to do. You went to go wash dishes and had to run back. But make sure that you're ready, focused, and paying attention. You've got your pens and pads out, and you're going to make some notes. Because we actually have some questions here. So let's ask them.
Yes.
Tuso wanted to find out what is the effect of if the connector neuron on the body is damaged?
Tuso.
Yes.
Great question, Tuso. It's a nice predict question. Whether they talk of the motor neuron, whether they talk of the sensory neuron, whether they talk of the connector neuron, they would like to ask the question, predict what will happen if this one is damaged. Now, important in a question like this, a predict question is what? What is it testing, guys? It's testing whether you know the function of that particular part. That's all it is. It's the reverse of the function. If I can ask you, what's the function of the connector neuron? You're going to tell me it does this or that. Then I ask you, what happens if it's not there? Obviously, whatever it was supposed to do now won't happen. So that's where we're going. Let's look at this diagram, because the diagram is relevant in this case. Here's the spinal cord. Here's the sensory neuron coming in. It makes a synapse with a connector neuron, which makes a synapse with a motor neuron. And the word connector tells you, or inter, or relay, all the same. They mean the same thing. It's the name of this neuron here. So the connector neuron, or the relay neuron, or the interneuron, the job is to connect or transfer the impulse from the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. So Tuso, if it's not there, then the connection is broken. So therefore, the impulse would not flow from the sensory neuron and back to the motor neuron. And if that doesn't happen, then obviously that impulse will not reach the effector, and therefore the person will not be able to respond to the stimulus. But remember, in this case, the feeling will still be there, and this is dangerous. Imagine your hand lying on a hot plate or a heater or anything hot. You can feel that it's hot, but your body is not reacting so that you pull your hand away. Right. Flesh gone in that case.
Wow, that
because you're not going to be able to respond to this. You can feel it, but you can't do anything about it. So that's it. Whenever, remember, if the sensory neuron is damaged, then obviously you would not be able to feel. That's also dangerous, because now you're not even knowing that you're burning. So you can burn your whole body that way. Because the minute you feel it quick, you pull away. So those things are very important. So if the sensory neuron is damaged, feeling is stopped. If the motor neuron is damaged, you cannot respond. And so too with the connector neuron. Next question.
Right. Then we had another one from Sweetness, which is a cute name. Hey guys, thank you so much for the great show. I want to know, what effect will having any damage on the spinal cord have on the body?
Right. We need to understand that the spinal cord, one of the functions, again, the question is asking, what will even damage? So first, what must we ask? What does the spinal cord do? And let's not confuse the vertebral column with the spinal cord. The vertebral column is the bones, or are the bones that cover and protect the spinal cord. Spinal cord is a bundle of nerves running in the middle there. Now, those nerves connect the body with the brain. That's one of the main functions of the spinal cord, is to connect the body, the rest of the body, with the brain, and connect the brain with the rest of the body. Also, we just learned now that the spinal cord is important in reflex actions. So if the spinal cord is damaged, depending what part of the spinal cord is damaged, it can hamper reflex action, and it may hamper communication between the brain and the rest of the body, and vice versa. It can also lead to paralysis. In other words, you cannot move your limbs, etc. That's very common in motor car accidents, and horse riding accidents, and falling off from a building, etc., where your spinal cord snaps. And the problem here, guys, you must understand that nerve cells are so specialized. They've become so specialized that they've lost the ability to regenerate. If you cut your nails, nails grows next week. You bruise your skin, skin grows back again. You cut your hair grows again. But when you damage nerve cells, they take very long, if at all, to repair. So that is why it's absolutely important to protect your nerve cells. You notice these days with the boxing also, when the boxers are in the ring, they have a lot of protective gear. In the old days, the boxers would leave their hands on the side and say, come and hit me. Muhammad Ali, That's what he did. He would take a beating. Look at how he talks today. Parkinson's and the rest of it, because he took a big thumping to the head. And every time you get a thumping to your head, you are damaging nerve cells. So the same way, if the spinal cord gets damaged, we have those type of problems.
All right.
Are we
Then,
done? Yeah?
do you think we can squeeze in one more?
One more, yes, why not?
Okay, so basically we had another one that came in from Coquette. So he wanted to find out, why is the cerebellum called the tree of life? But I'm not sure if he was confused about that one.
Coquetzo, the cerebellum is not actually called the tree of life, but the white matter on the inside. If we go back to that diagram, I'm not sure if it shows properly. Okay, here it's actually showing the reverse. In the brain, the white matter is on the inside. This is like an X-ray, by the way. So the white matter, can you see this? Can you see the structure that looks like a tree there in this area, guys? I'm sure you can see. Now that structure in the brain is white. Arbor vitae, the Latin name, tree of life. Because of the way it looks like a branching tree, it's given this common name, the arbor vitae, the tree of life. But it is not the cerebellum that's called that, but it is the white matter on the inside of the cerebellum that's given this name. Okay. By the way, guys, don't stress if you do not understand that part and you can't remember that part. It is not examinable. Okay? It's interesting to know. Any more there, time? No?
Nope, I think we're good to go.
Good, good, good. So we were busy with the eye. And we're done up to that point. All right, and we did the functions of D. So we'll move on. Explain how part E functions in dim light. Very important to know that. Remember, I pointed this out when we introduced these topics. So first we must know what is part E. There's part E there. Label first, and that is the iris. The iris is made up of smooth muscle. That is radial and circular muscles. These muscles are antagonistic. If the one contracts, the other one relaxes. When the other one contracts, this one relaxes, and so on. Now, this one here, I remind my learners with a very simple thing here. Debit and credit. Debit and credit. So we want to know in dim light. There's where the D comes from. In dim light, R for radial muscles. Radial muscles. C for contracts. And we put a square there, so we put again the circular muscles, C for circular muscles, relaxes. By the way, that you don't even need a mnemonic for, because I told you in the beginning that if the one contracts, the other one relaxes. Now, what is the result of this? That's the important part. What is the result of this? Because of this, the pupil becomes wider, or we say it dilates. Let's go back to the diagram. The pupil is the space between the iris. Remember, in your body, the iris is not like two lines. The iris is actually a circular structure like that. And whatever color the iris is, by the way, that's the color of your eyes, unless, of course, you're wearing different color contact lenses. But that is the story. So the whole, as we may call it, is the pupil. So what happens here is the pupil becomes wider to allow more light to enter. Guys, these two sentences are based on logic. If it's dim, we need to take in as much light as possible. And if we need to take in as much light as possible, then we need to make the opening wider. So this part, you should get 1, 2 marks. Sometimes even 3 because you know about the pupil. 1, 2, 3. So even if you can't remember this, at least this last part, you should get out of 5 marks, you should get 3. This is just to make you remember. Remember, in bright light, it would be the opposite. So if you learn this, then you know that in bright light is the opposite. In bright light, the radial muscles will relax, the circular muscles will contract, the pupil becomes smaller, it constricts, narrower, and allows less light to enter. Why? Because we don't want too much light to enter, because the rods and cones will get damaged. So if you learn this one, the other one is the opposite. This is also something you need to learn. Learning skills condense your learning. You don't have to learn both. Because the problem with learning both, you get to the exams and you say, ish, what do I know now? Bright or dumb? Which is bright, which is dumb? If you know that you know bright, if they ask you bright, hooray, you answer it. If they ask you dumb, hooray, because you answer the opposite to what you know. It's as simple as that. Okay? Explain why a person whose ciliary muscles do not function properly should wear glasses. First of all, the ciliary muscles and body are in this area here. And attached to them are the suspensory ligaments, and attached to that is the lens. And the lens is our focusing part of the eye. When we want to see something closer or further away, this lens shape changes. And what causes the lens shape to change? The ciliary muscles and the suspensory ligaments. So if the ciliary muscles are not functioning, then the lens will not be able to alter its shape. And if the lens cannot alter its shape, we would not be able to focus. So ciliary muscles alter lens shape. So if it's not there, lens, no alter. That's not how you write, but how you remember. No alter, and therefore no focus. That's why you need glasses to fix that. It's as simple as that. Okay? Notice sometimes you look at a question and you think, wow, what the hell are they asking? We did not learn this in school. But you did learn the function of the ciliary muscle. You did learn the function of the suspensory ligament. You did learn the function of the lens. And that is what this question is asking. It's just asking it with a curved ball. And that is what it's about. Understand your work. If you swat your work, you are not going to manage the story. You have to understand, love the life science. This is the subject that's alive. It's about you, it's about me, it's about our bodies and how we work. So you have got to love it. Talk about it. This question says, give a diagram there. They say, which diagram, A or B, illustrates short-sightedness? Now let's look at a diagram. A or B. A or B illustrates short-sightedness. Now let's look at the diagram. There's the retina. The image is falling here. There's the retina in this one here. The image is falling there. So what's the problem? If a person is short-sighted, that means they can only see things that are close to them. They can't see things that are far. So obviously the answer would be A, because you can see that the image is falling before the retina. So it's not long enough. And the next one would say which one is for long-sightedness, and that would be B, because it's falling behind the retina. So that means you're looking at a book, but you can't see the image because the image is falling behind the retina. So what you do, you push the book further away so that you're moving this image further so it falls on the retina. And that is how the optician corrects your vision, by giving you concave or convex lenses, depending on which of these two. Concave for short-sightedness and convex for long-sightedness. I'm going to skip this question on the eye. I want to go straight into the ear. Okay. Study the diagram of the human ear below and answer the questions that follow. Label parts A, B, C, D, and E. A, auditory canal. B, tympanic membrane. What was next? C, D, and E, right? All of them. This one here, all together they call the ossicles. You cannot write hammer or anvil or stirrup because they've given you a bracket over all three. Together they are called the ossicles, the tiny bones in the middle ear. D, there is the oval window. And E, look at where this nerve is coming from. It's coming from the semicircular canals and the sacculus. So this branch of the nerve is called the equilibrium nerve. This branch of the nerve here coming from the cochlea, that is the auditory nerve. This one is for hearing. This one is for balance. got it? Good, labeling the. They say part A secretes a wax known as cerumen. Sometimes the wax forms a solid plug. State two functions of cerumen. Obviously, it's for protection and to keep the ear canal moist. Will sound waves reach part D if C was removed? There's C. If we remove the C, would sound waves reach there? No, they won't, because this is air. And if air, the sound waves will not move. If there was liquid there, it would be able to move down that way. And I've given you the answer for the reason as well there. This question here, we will not get into it now because we will not get finished with that. I just want to go back to the last one then. Guys, remember this is balance, and that is hearing. Those are the two important functions that you need to know about the ear, and it would be covered again in next few segments where we would go into hearing and balance. With that, I'll leave you over to time.
All right. So mindsetters, I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. And well, in fact, I don't have to hope. I see on the page that you guys are being awesome. You've been on the page as always, posting, and I'm glad. Matrix, I just want to say to those of you who are writing your life science paper soon, I just want to say best of luck, and I just want to say good luck and good studying. Make sure, as we've been saying, you follow these sessions and you have your pens and pads out and you make notes. But this is the part where I now say thank you for joining us, and on behalf of Mr. Aslam, I'm going to say thank you for watching, and this is where I sign off and say thanks and see you next time. Cheers.